be grateful for everything around us. No matter what it is, you can always find something to be grateful for, right? And just realize that fear is an emotion that should initially be embraced, and fear in everything, to, having to restructure your life like me because you've lost a spouse and you've got to raise children on your own.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. What's up, my friends? Welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, Create Your Career. This is conversation number 144. Total episodes number 244. Drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. This is the first conversation, the first guest that is a returning guest. I am so excited to announce that Andrew Coussens is the first returning guest in the entire podcast. And you know what? It couldn't be any better. He was all the way back on conversation number 67, 100 episodes ago, and now he is here again. What is so cool about the returning guest is it's like you establish a baseline with the first conversation, and now we can just see the progress or lack thereof. No, but we saw awesome progress today. We established the baseline, and now I want to see where we are at from that baseline. The conversations are me showing you a real life example of somebody going out there, defying the odds and getting after it and helping other people. Now, where are you from since then? That's what we're doing with a returning guest. It's incredible to see the amount of growth and the amount of action that Andrew has taken since the last time I talked to him. We talk about all these things. I'm not even going to spoil them today. You can find this podcast and all of the other conversations and the contemplations, the two segments within the podcast on kristoflewis.com/podcast. And you can find them on any podcasting app. You can go over to YouTube and watch the conversations. You can see the video, subscribe over there. That would be massively helpful. To share it with a friend as well. And you can find me on Instagram at Kristof Lewis. So without further ado, let's get into the first returning guest of the Kristof Lewis Podcast, Create Your Career. Twice. Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm just, you're kind of always on my heart ever since the last podcast. It'd be such a great discussion. I was looking forward to reaching out to you and seeing if we couldn't get a second one.
Yeah, like I was saying just a second ago, I was like super humbled that you wanted to come on again. That just means a lot to me. And ever since you booked, I was like, you know what? Because you reached out to me and you're like, let's get on the podcast again. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to repeat guests yet. And then I was like, let's just pull the trigger. I'm never going to do it. And then other people started reaching out to me when I started mentioning that. So it's really cool. But we talked about a lot of good things, and I want to get into those a little bit. And I know you got some stuff to talk about too. But before we get into the rest of the show, for those of the listeners that may not know who you are yet, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit more?
Yeah. My name is Andrew Coussens. I am a two-time author of fiction, although I use that term loosely because I think we both know the first book was just an attempt to get stuff by my organization,
sure.
The Publications Review Board there, and not have it get shot down for violating classified info. I am getting over a little cough. I don't have
no worries,
COVID-19, but
I was about to say, at least we're doing this remote.
That's the environment nowadays, right? So we got to talk about it. Hopefully, we talk about it like as if you got some kind of like bubonic plague. You got to admit it first before you
it's true.
Can move along.
Common courtesy.
But spent 8 years of my life doing secret stuff. I guess secret squirrel stuff. 13 years before that, I was a federal agent. Lots going on. A lot of new stuff's going on. So you tell me when you want me to launch into that stuff.
Yeah, man. No. Yeah. So for the record, I will preface this by I did read your first book. I know you're aware of that, but for the listeners, I put it out there and I put it on the. I'm still, insanely enough, doing the book challenge, one book a week, and that was his first book was on there. I just got back on track for the first time, so I'm like 45 and 45 right now, and your book was in there. And I don't think I'll be able to fit your book within the challenge again, but or your second one, but I'm gonna read it again. But I'm saying all this right now because you guys need to go out there. You need to check the book out, and it is really cool. Because when I read the first one, I was like, yes, this is very reminiscent of some things that I've encountered and things that I've done. And, you could tell it was written from somebody that was boots on ground. But it is a fiction, but it is really good, and you should check it out. And I think it was like one of the few fiction books that I stepped out of my nonfiction zone to read because I knew what it was about, and it was really good. So I think that's a good thing to talk about. And, and for the listeners and for you, I kind of talked to, this is the first repeat guest in the history of the podcast. And I think that is one of the most incredible things to me is, one, you wanted to come back on here. And two, like, this is when we're recording this is March, and it's 2 years we're doing the podcast. So I think a phenomenal place to start off on is, I read your first book. I really enjoyed it. 5 out of 5 stars, that is. And I want to know more about your second book. You kind of hinted towards it in your book. It closed with hinting towards this one. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And see, what I wanted to do with the first book, I didn't accomplish all the way. And that was to really portray the character's dilemma with their passion. We talked a little bit about guys downrange, problems with their families, PTSD, anxiety, war injuries of the physical nature. And this is really a way that I was able to get, and most of it was through dialogue, through these guys when they're alone. One guy's more inquisitive. The main character, Damien's way more inquisitive than some of the other guys in his unit. And he's asking him, he's like, what the hell are we supposed to do? Look at us. We've got problems. We've got issues. Nobody really wants to bring that up, and that's accurate, right? That's so much like today's environment. You just don't want to bring it up with guys in your unit. You're afraid what they might think. You're afraid what they feel about rolling out on target with you, right? I mean, is this guy going to be able to hold his own, measure up when he admits he's seeing a therapist, or he's seeing, he's having problems at home with his marriage, what have you. So, but I got that done here, in Relapse, which, and we'll talk about this, which led me right into another passion with Rescue 22 Foundation. And I'm excited to talk to you about that, because I spent all of SHOT Show chasing that down, like literally like just doing stuff for them. Obviously I'm getting nothing for it, because it's a 501c3, right? Yeah. And I went to SHOT Show for 3 purposes, and I got none of the other 2 done because I was so enthralled and so passionate about their mission. That I just really, and plus I had one of their dogs. I've got one of their dogs now as a service dog for me. So, Dude, but so that's so cool. No. That's what I kind of, like, I was hinting to you before, and like I was kind of saying to the guests, like, for the reoccurring guests or for the returning guests, I kind of want it to be more of like, hey, like, we know each other, we've talked before, and we've talked about your career transition already. And even though I focus on careers, this is definitely still an extension of the careers, but I kind of want my host to be more of a co-host. And I enjoy that, that's why I call them conversations. So no, man. And recently I've been known to say, like, however you answer a question is the right way to answer a question, because I truly feel like that. I feel like that. I think it's funny and awesome that you did go there to SHOT Show. First of all, that's awesome. But second of all, that you went there and you only got one of the 3 things you were trying to do. But obviously, like, that's what they say. Don't have like priorities, have a priority. And you went in there and you did obviously what was most important to you. You obviously had the first book, you did the second book, and this is out now, for the record, for everybody. But you did say some important things, not only in the books, but you're talking about, family problems, PTSD, going to a therapist, and obviously, the other people on target questioning, is this guy legitimate? Can he keep his shit together because he went to a therapist? And there definitely has been a negative connotation of going to talk to a therapist. I mean, as I grew up, that is exactly what, like, I thought there was massively something wrong with somebody when they went. And I like that you're bringing that up right now, and that our culture is shifting away from that, and that it's not a bad thing to go and talk to a professional. Like, if you're going to work out, wouldn't you want to get advice from somebody who's certified as a professional? So why wouldn't you do that for your brain? You know what I'm saying? So it's so cool that you brought that into the books and everything else. Yeah, personal experience, man. That was just it's something I wanted to infuse the book with, because the main character obviously loosely based on me, and and a few other guys, but he he's spent so much of his time trying to deal with some of the stuff he's seen, right, or experienced firsthand.
Yeah.
Doesn't know how to process it. It just kind of haunts him a little bit. Which it did me to some extent, and a lot of other guys. And the only way to do that is to really work it within those means, right, of what therapy can provide. In this case, it was EMDR, which, man, if anybody wants any recommendations, people that have been on your show for something that takes less time and also processes it right out of your system. So it just, and I forget what EMDR stands for. It's there's two ways to do it, either with vibrating paddles or the eye movement, and it disassociates. Yeah, it disassociates your body's response to the stimuli, so you don't go into full fight or flight mode. Which the book talks a lot about that. How anxiety just creeps up and you don't even understand why. Which I realized, and again, to make that segue, that a lot of guys do that through Animal Companions, the service dog project. Let me tell you a story before I forget. So I was looking for a motorcycle, knowing I had issues, and solving a couple of them with EMDR. And I was looking for a motorcycle last summer. I really wanted an Indian or a Harley. Every guy does this downrange. That's all you think about is motorcycles, cars, right? But and women to some extent. But and I found one I really liked. So the guy's like, "Yeah, come on, take a look at it." So I go out there. It turns out the guy's a Marine, right? Separated from his unit 6 years prior. He was in Iraq, including Fallujah. The guy is selling his motorcycle and his car because he was awarded a service dog by the DOJ and couldn't afford it. I didn't realize that they had to pay for a large chunk of their own service dogs.
I didn't know that either.
So this guy, all of a sudden, is selling stuff he needs to pay for this service dog because he knows he needs that connection and that help. And it broke my heart, man. Like, I was like, just tell me what you wanted for the motorcycle. I'll pay it. Because I was like, man, I'll pay whatever you have it listed at. Just let me help.
Sure.
And I did. Obviously we both got something out of the deal, but I felt bad that he had to pay for a large percentage of that, which is where Rescue 22 comes in. And I can talk about that in a bit, but they were like, yeah, screw that. Let's fix what's broke there. Let's get these guys linked up with their animal free of charge. Let's not have that hanging out there. And, before I got mine and spent time with mine in the gym and all these public places, getting looks from people, because it's still not a very common occurrence, I saw another guy in the gym doing the same thing with his dog. And the dog just was focused on him the whole time, just like my dog is, just focused on it's his handler.
Yeah.
And what he's feeling, what he's thinking, and it's awesome, man. It's a really awesome program. And I just, that experience, I relayed at SHOT Show to the governor of Idaho. Because I was like, this program is working in Florida, and Idaho is one of the only states that has a presence at SHOT Show because they're so, Second Amendment friendly. And then I relayed that story directly to the governor.
That's awesome.
I thought that was cool.
Good for you. No, absolutely. That's awesome. And to have a voice for them is incredible. So in what capacity are you helping out then? Do you have a position, or are you just volunteering, or?
Yeah, I just volunteered my time.
That's awesome. How cool is that?
I just was like, let's do this, and we have, if you look on my Instagram page on A Failed State Novel, there's a photo with the founder, the co-founders, which you'll appreciate, of Rescue 22. One's was a Army Ranger dog handler, and the other one was a Navy SEAL dog handler. They're both the co-founders of the organization. They both have their own private companies that train dogs. But there's a photo of us walking to that banquet I talked to you about in the hotel or in the casino, five or six abreast with our dogs that somebody filmed. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. The dogs are all alphas, and they're all dogs that want to make a difference and protect. And and worry about their handlers, but yet all these dogs get along, all the owners, all the handlers get along, and it was just such a great shot.
Yeah,
But
man.
yeah,
So how does somebody
yeah.
like, so say I wanted a dog, how would I just go to Rescue 22 website and then start the process that way, or how would I get involved in that if somebody was
So
interested?
I think officially you have to go through the Department of Justice. I think there's an application process for that,
Okay.
but I've heard it taking as long as 4 to 6 years.
Holy smokes.
I know the program in Florida is expedited somewhat because they had a governor's initiative for it.
Okay.
And we're trying to do the same, obviously, in Idaho, in my home state of Idaho. We're trying to push that along. And we also have a little bit of traction in the state of Washington as well. And I facilitated both those two states because I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ever since running into that Marine that couldn't pay for his own service dog, I'm just like, man, this has to happen for more guys. This has to be a resource for guys. So I'm not sure if you can expedite it outside of Florida through Rescue 22, but Rescue 22 is a national, if not a global organization for vets or for American war vets. But I know they can put you in touch with the right folks.
Yeah.
I mean, they're great folks. And right now it's a fledgling organization because they're just getting their feet underneath them. But they have so many dogs available that are trained specifically for that companion process. I know a few physically disabled vets were at SHOT Show and they did a demonstration for how the dogs that they've trained for the physically disabled assist with their mobility. And that was just encouraging. I did it at one of the booths. I can't remember what booth it was. And there was just such a huge crowd there. There was also Chuck Liddell was there.
Nice.
The author, another Naval Special Warfare guy, Jack Carr, was there as well. He's a contributor to Rescue 22.
All right.
And I was able to slip him my book, so it worked out great.
Nice. Yeah, I was stalking the hell out of SHOT Show on Instagram.
Yeah.
Just everybody. It seemed like everybody I followed but me was there, just loving life, and there's just such cool things to see there. So it's cool that you guys were able to be there with that foundation and be able to have such vision, have so many people in the right spot be able to see something like that. And obviously that was really intentional. And one of the questions I don't think I was asking when you were on the show last, but obviously I kind of touched on, and we've already actually touched on it a little bit, but I've been asking every single guest about why they help people. And I think it sounds like an easy question, an obvious question, and we've definitely touched on the answer a little bit more, but I kind of want to hear more about like how you really feel and why, especially because you just told us that you're volunteering your time to do that. So apart from the story that you gave to us about the Marine, are there any other reasons or things that contributed to why you're volunteering and helping out with an organization and why you love to help people?
Yeah, we touched on this before. I think one of the greatest ways to induce your own therapy, right? Induce your own healing is to serve others.
Yeah.
I know there's some elements that we touched on before in the first podcast, but yeah, I like that continuity. I always feel good putting myself out there for others. Like I don't get paid by Rescue 22, that's not my goal in doing this. Maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. That's irrelevant to me. But just to align people with that's especially vets with that option. Having gone through some of the same issues they did downrange or after you're back in the rear. Yeah. I mean, for a while, SHOT Show, and that's why I encourage you to go, was the only place I felt any kind of peace because you're there among guys that have seen what you have or worse, right?
Yeah.
Experienced what you have or worse. And it's just such a camaraderie, you just feel like nothing's wrong with you there. Because you're around all these guys that have the same experience.
I mean, that's such a great point there too, of like intentionally putting yourself in places where, okay, so we're not always going to feel comfortable and we should learn how to function in society, but I do think it is good going to be able to talk with people like that. I know one of the things that happened when I experienced an incident that I actually made an episode about when the Chinook went down, that we had a meeting about some of the guys that were there, and we just talked about it. and we shared our emotions, and it was just something that really helped. So I think it's a great example that you bring up of being around those people that you may not know them, but they've gone through, like you said, something similar, maybe worse or whatever, but they understand it to a certain level. So I think that's a great point to put out, is to be able to intentionally put yourself out there and be okay with talking about that stuff. And then definitely, I think it's phenomenal that you're going out there and you're contributing in such a way that you are right now. I mean, you're volunteering and it's something you care about. And it's really cool for me to see that story that you said about the Marine going out there and like seeing this and being like, dude, holy shit, like something's wrong like here. Like this dude endured all these bad things, and now he's back, and thankfully he's here safe, but he has to sell all of his things, like his mobility, to do this. And oh man, that's really tough. But again, like, I want to be able to highlight to the listeners, like, do that thing, do it. And obviously, like you said, you wrote in the books and you're saying yourself, like, you still are dealing with things. So I want to highlight that you can deal with your own shit while you're helping other people deal with their shit too. Like, you don't have to be this like fixed kind of character to be able to help other people. So no, that's a phenomenal thing, man, right there. And I will do a little bit of research on my end, and I'll throw those kind of things in the show notes, the Rescue 22, and I'll see if I can find anything on the DOJ site or something like that to be able to put in there, so we can put a little bit more information on there. But so I don't want to talk about too much of the stuff we talked about before, but like since we last talked, so in more recent history, has there been anything new that's come up in your life that you figured out that's been really pivotal, that's helped you grow even more? Because one of the things, like, again, I like using a lot of fitness examples of when you go to the gym and you kind of plateau and you're kind of looking for maybe a new exercise or a new routine or something to be able to get you to that next level. And I found in my own life that, like, right now I kind of feel like I've plateaued again. Like, I'm reading these books, I'm having these conversations, and I feel good, and I know I have had growth mentally, but how do I break out to the next level, whether, of light enlightenment or just consciousness or of helping other people more? Have you experienced anything within that last few months or year that we've talked?
Yeah, I have. And not to back up, not to
Please, yeah, no problem.
course a little bit, but were you downrange when you're talking about Extortion 17, right? Was that the helicopter, the helo?
Yes.
You were talking, yes. So you were downrange during that?
Oh, I was on that bird. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening, and I'll tell you here and I'll tell you guys a little bit on the episode. I don't want to get into me too much on this episode, but I was that was my first deployment with that group, and I was the FNG. If you're not in the military, that's the new guy. And no, I was the kid who, literally the kid at the time, that would go run on the bird and put the crypto on there. And obviously that was QRF, and they went on there, and I ran on there, put the last minute crypto on there, ran off, high-fived them, and that was it, unfortunately. And God blessed all of them and all their lives. And yeah,
I'm pretty sure I was in country. I think I was in country during that same time, although I think I was in Jalalabad. I was in JVAD at the time. And I think we had heard that. I think a lot of guys were kind of mortified because obviously our unit's made up of a bunch of guys, tier 1, tier 2, guys from units like obviously Naval Special Warfare Development Group and other, SEAL teams and what have you. But it was rough. And I'll tell you what, we don't have to continue on this, but something just didn't seem right about it. People were kind of perplexed about some of the factors that led towards that tragedy, which, made it even more difficult for guys to get past. But yeah, that's crazy, man. I guess I didn't make that connection. I knew you were downrange, man. But.
And it's like, I'm a little picky about what I talk about on here, and I did make a whole episode out of it. If you guys want to look at, I have no idea what number it is. I'm not even going to do the research. If you really want to look at it, you'll find it. But it's I did make a contemplation episode, so it's just me, and it took me. I mean, that's going to be 9 years this year, so it took me about like 8 years to be able to share that publicly, and it's I'm probably gonna shift off of it right now. I don't want to get caught on it too much, but yeah, it was pretty hardcore to say the very least, and I don't want to get into it too much. I don't want to derail the podcast and we get hiccup, but no, it was incredible in a very terrible way. You're right. It was unreal. So No, because of all of that, and I will interject for a couple more seconds. Every year, once a year, we do a ruck for 31 miles for 31 heroes. DC, I think there's a couple other cities that do them. So if you guys are interested in continuing to honor those heroes, the gentlemen that lost their life on there, then contact me and I'll put you in touch with how to be able to be a part of that to continue the memory and everything on there. So
Outstanding.
yeah, man.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's no, I think that's great. So I didn't want to cut you off about you were some of the new things you had learned.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that. I started dating a gal here who was an Army brat. I didn't really think after I lost my wife that I'd have a chance to fall in love again and experience all that stuff. So not to get mushy on you, but
No, man, I just got mushy.
yeah, right. But so I had a little bit of a resurgence, but we had some difficulties because I wasn't necessarily ready to let go of some stuff, I think, at the time. And it kind of forced me to look at myself a little bit, because when we took a little bit of a break, I essentially took that time to improve myself as
Mhm.
as an individual, and I dove into all kinds of self-help books. The one self-help book that you'll immediately recognize is "Can't Hurt Me."
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a
Yep.
popular one by David Goggins. But another one that I stumbled upon actually was a book by Gabrielle Bernstein, of all people, where she talks a lot about, and that book is called, the title alone like had me running. I was like, somebody recommended, and I was like, a woman I know recommended. I was like, I am not looking at that book because it's called Super Attractor,
Ah,
and I was
yeah.
like, there's no way I'm reading a book called Super Attractor. But I did pick it up and I delved into that thing. And I'll say one of the biggest things I got out of it is something we kind of already are hardwired to know, and that's to be grateful for everything around us. No matter
Mhm.
what it is, you can always find something to be grateful for, right? The sun on the back of your neck, the fact that you've got running water, that you've got food at your disposal. I mean, there's just always something to be grateful for. And just realize that fear is an emotion that should initially be embraced, and fear in everything, fear in getting a piece of mail you didn't expect, or maybe a bill for something you didn't realize that was still outstanding, to everything, to having to restructure your life like me because you've lost a spouse and you've got to raise children on your own. But to process that fear and then just give it to, and she left it pretty open so everybody can use it for what they need, but give it to your higher power, to God, to the universe, to whatever it is that you feel has a place within your heart, and realize that you can ask for the things you want, but the more you submit to the will of whomever you pray to, believe in, the easier things come. And I only got into that a couple of weeks before I kind of figured out the things I needed to figure out to move forward with this woman that I had these feelings for, and I keep having to come back to it because it's something that's fleeting, almost like a perishable skill, like shooting, right?
Oh, sure.
Where if you don't practice it all the time, you don't use it. And I always go back to that. I mean, I just bought a business. We'll talk a little bit about that does a lot of stuff that you'd like, that I'm obviously got past in. I've got to remember like how blessed I am, regardless of what my money situation is, or how I'm feeling health wise or whatever. Like there's just a lot every day to be grateful for. So much so that I think at one point that if my life was to end that particular day when I was really into that book and its premises, that I was really okay with that.
Wow.
That I would felt that I could have died happy.
Wow.
Because of everything I got to experience, the love I got to have, the children I got to bless my life with. And I haven't recommended it too much. I've talked to a few people about it, because initially I was like, I'm not reading a book that looks this cheesy, but man, it really brought back all the
Yeah.
things that
No, that's good.
mean so much to us
Yeah.
as human beings, right?
No, that's powerful,
And
man.
yeah,
Yeah, don't.
and it just yeah.
I was gonna say, don't judge a book by its cover, right?
There you go.
No, I'm just glad that you and I can talk about this and hopefully be an example of. I don't think it's mushy gushy or anything to talk about that stuff. Just like being okay with going to a therapist, talking about these things. I know it can be harder for men, obviously, to talk about these kind of things, and they think I have this tough guy, especially with some of the background, the background you have, and some of the stuff that maybe I've done or whatever. But it's not like that at all. It doesn't have to be like that. So glad you brought that up, and I'll throw those books in the show notes as well. But before we get out of here for the night, I did want to go into what you had said about your business, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's just a company that had been existing in Idaho. Initially, it was a firearms company. They did do some training for SWAT teams and for civilians, but it was called Forward Movement Training. Well, what I liked about it is the owner developed a curriculum with the Idaho Board of Education for what would ordinarily be called run, hide, fight for active shooter scenarios in schools. They relabeled it in friendlier terms, and they obviously didn't make it so compelling where people are afraid to talk about it or discuss some of the premises in it. Move, secure, defend is what they labeled it, and started pushing it to schools, churches, private businesses, and that really kind of caught my eye. So when the owner was kind of moving on and wanted to sell the business, I kind of snapped it up so that I could, continue that. But yeah, it's fun, man, and it keeps me in touch with some of the things I've done. Some of the instructors I've hired were people I met along the way. A former Marine, an active duty Air Force medic, a former law enforcement officer from Henderson PD who was on the ground during the shootings in Las Vegas. Wow. Back at the Mandalay Bay. Yeah. So guys that have been there, done that, realized lessons learned are important, and to kind of move forward with those lessons they've learned and try to do better next time. And, sure. and if there, God forbid, there is a next time. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, man.
And I went to shop.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I went to shop for that. But, man, I ended up doing Rescue 22 Foundation stuff.
How cool is that, though? Like I was saying earlier, that's really cool that you're able to do that, especially you're volunteering like that and you're doing that. And it's just so cool. So what's even cooler to me is just the entirety of which is this podcast episode is not only you coming on again, but what I really want to do, and I'm thinking about this just right off the cuff, is what I really want to do, because you've been able to articulate so well, is you were on here before, now you're on here again. I really want to know what you've done, and it just solidifies the fact that you were such a good guest for the first one, because you've continued this growth. I mean, we're talking about Rescue 22. We're talking about another book. We're talking about a new company. We're talking about somebody new in your life. I mean, that's some powerful shit, man. That's crazy. That's good stuff. You know what I'm saying? So that's a lot of we just covered all of the bases. You know what I'm saying? So that's really powerful. I couldn't be more excited to have you back on here and to talk about all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that book. But before we get out of here, where can everybody find you and find the books and anything else, the business, anything?
Yeah, the business is called forwardmovementtraining.com. It's all one word, and it talks a little bit about our mission statement. There will be some changes forthcoming because we plan on maybe rebranding a little bit and kind of branching out. But it's done a lot of good things for some very scary premises in our society. The book, of course, is andrewcoussens.com. Is where both books are sold. The Audible is coming out next month.
Nice.
For a failed state, not for relapse, a failed state. So that's exciting. And then of course the ebook is still available for both of them on iTunes, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all that good stuff. But man, it's such a pleasure, man. Like I said, you've kind of been on my heart. I stayed in touch with you, and we've got such a bond that I was just so excited to come back here. More so than I have for any other podcast.
Oh, damn, man, that means a lot.
Yeah, well, it's a high bar to set, but it was good, man.
I appreciate it, man. It's like I said in the beginning, it's something special, and it coincides with the whole therapy thing, the get emotional thing. I just love that people are okay with expressing this kind of stuff, and just they want to talk about this stuff, and that's why I love having and calling them conversations and be able to promote that, because I know that there are people that listen to this that may subscribe to the notion, maybe just one thing, maybe the therapist, maybe the, talking to your friend, especially if you're a guy, if you get back, you think you're this tough guy or whatever, talk about this shit, man. I think you're tough enough if you can talk about this stuff, because you're going to be beating yourself up down the road if that shit is bouncing around in your head and you can't get it out. So to be able to share this stuff, like honestly, share the victories of what you've done, like see how far you've come just in the last time we talked. Like that's, in the whole grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of time. I want to tell the listeners one more thing before we get out of here for the night, but why am I doing these podcasts? A lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is to highlight people like this. Is just in the time that we've talked, he's gone out there and done all of these things, so it is feasible. You can do it too. Don't just point your finger and say, oh, well, this, that, and this happened, so he can do it. No, screw that. Look into his story a little bit more. Listen to our last podcast conversation, it was like 67 or something, and just see the progress and know that you can make the progress yourself. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your night, my friend.
Thanks, man.